we can get started. So hello everyone, I hope you're having a nice weekend, nice Sunday. I see that the vast majority of you have actually all of you have your cameras off. I like to see faces when I present so I can see what's landing and what's not. So if you have a camera, it'd be nice if you're free to turn it on. That way I can see some faces and I don't feel like I'm talking to a wall of, well, a wall of unmoving pictures, I suppose. So if you have a camera, that'd be great. Hello, Camilla, is that how you pronounce that?
Yeah, it's Camille.
Camille, okay, perfect. Great. Hello, Jean, or no, hang on, Janine, sorry. Hello, Janine. Perfect. Okay, I got a couple of you. Oh, there's someone else there too. Who is it? Claire, hello, nice to see you. Okay. Well, so let's get started. So the purpose of what we're going to cover off today is, as you can see on this title page, how long it really takes to learn a language. And we'll also go through a couple of frameworks you can follow and some steps you can follow to go, okay, this is how I can divide my time. So it'll be a very practical session. I recommend you have something to write with, like notes, because you will want to write some, or at a bare minimum, to have something to at least screenshot if you know how to do that. So let's get started. So here's our plan for today. I'll tell you a little bit about me. I want to talk about the CEFR levels. I'd like to talk about how to spend your study time. I'd like to share a few sample study plans. I'll share some of my favorite resources. I have some closing remarks and then some closing remarks, further reading, and then we'll have a little bit of time at the end for Q&A. So a little bit about me on the language side. So I speak 5 languages. I'd like to learn at least 3 more. So I speak English, I speak French, I speak Mandarin, Spanish, and then Gujarati, which is language from India. Languages I'd still like to learn are Russian, again, Indian flag, but this time for Hindi, and then Arabic. Doesn't have to, I'm not sure which dialect of Arabic I'll learn, but I do want to learn Arabic in my lifetime. When I learn languages, I'm a little bit different in the sense that I find a lot of language learners, when they try to learn a language, they don't have a goal of learning a language to a point where they have a near native level of fluency. But when I learn languages, that's my goal. So it takes me a long time. Takes me years and years and years because I want to have such a level in whatever language I'm learning that it's comparable to my English. And so it takes a very long time. When you look at these 5 languages that I already speak, my English, French, and Spanish are essentially interchangeable, essentially. Mandarin and Gujarati are strong, but not quite as strong as my French and Spanish. And these 3 languages, so Russian, Hindi, and Arabic, I don't really speak. In terms of my work, so I run a business called the Calgary Language Nerds. I live in Calgary, which is a city in Canada. So essentially what my team and I, what we do is we teach a wide variety of languages. We teach 14 languages. I teach a number of those, and then I have tutors who work for me, and they teach languages too. I post pretty frequently on a variety of social media websites, so YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. I'm pretty active. So you're welcome to follow me if you'd like to. You can search at Polyglot Azrin or just search Azrin the Language Nerd and you will find me. I travel a lot too. So I've traveled to over 100 cities across 15 countries. I haven't traveled since COVID, unfortunately, but I do enjoy traveling quite a bit. And often I travel, excuse me. Often I travel for language learning purposes. So I'll travel somewhere for the sole purpose of practicing a language. I might go somewhere in a couple of weeks, actually. I just haven't decided. We'll see. I might take a last minute trip. A couple of other fun facts. So I'm vegetarian. I love superhero movies and I listen to a lot of music, although the vast majority of it is not in English. Most of it's in other languages. Okay. So there's a quick introduction about me. Actually, we'll tell you one more thing. It's not in these slides. So just my actually, let's go over here. I'll just put this slide up. So language learning and teaching has been a part of my life for about 15 years, 14 or 15 years now. Whether it be in the sense of me being interested in learning languages and me learning languages myself, or teaching. And I haven't really talked a lot about this recently, but I'm starting to talk more about it. I like to take a behavioral approach to learning. So what that means is I like to take approaches that rely upon how humans behave based on human psychology. So that's something I've been thinking a lot about. So when I look at language learning and I try and work with language learners, I try to think about how do humans actually behave and how do you create programs that match how human beings actually behave. So a good example would be something like if someone was doing an hour of studying a week as of right now, it is highly unlikely that they would go and do 4 hours a week of studying in week 2. It's just not going, it's very unlikely for something like that to happen. So if I were working with someone, I would never create a plan of them doing 4 hours a week of studying, because they've demonstrated that what they're capable of now is an hour. And so that's a very small example of taking a very behavioral or psychological approach to languages and language acquisition. So that's another fun fact about me. Okay, just give me a yes or no in the chat. Who has heard of the CEFR levels? It's like the A1, A2, B1, B2. Who's heard of those? I'm assuming a lot of you. Okay, yeah, perfect, good. So we won't spend like a crazy amount of time on these then. This, however, you probably haven't heard of in terms of how many hours it tends to take to reach each level. For teens and adults, it's different for kids. This is something you likely haven't. This I find most people haven't heard of before. So a quick description of what each level means, just in case you don't know. So A1 and A2 are the 2 beginner levels. And A1, in very simple terms, means that I can ask you a very direct and simple question. You can reply with a very direct and simple reply. What's your name? My name is Azrin. Where are you from? I'm from Canada. What are your hobbies? I like to watch movies. Do you have any siblings? Yes. What's their names? Etc. etc. Very, very simple, kind of ask, answer, ask, answer. It has to be very slow, obviously. A2, I call it a tourist level. That's what I personally call it, because it means that you can handle a lot of routine interactions, many of which would take place when you're traveling, going to restaurants, taking public transportation, taking taxis or an Uber nowadays. You know, taxis are not, well, actually taxis are common in other countries. Any kind of, when you meet someone for the first time, that initial 5 minutes of small talk, these are all A2 skills. A B1 means you're conversational. You can talk about basically anything as long as you don't have to get in depth. So you can talk about your country, but if someone asks you very detailed questions about the politics of your country, that's not at a B1 level anymore. A B2 level is everything at a B1, but now you can start to talk about things in more depth, although you still do it with mistakes and you still have to search for words. A C1 and C2 are obviously both very, very advanced. You're essentially bilingual. Well, B2 is bilingual too, but here you're not even making that many mistakes anymore. You don't fumble over your words anymore. You can read, understand, talk about, and read, understand, talk about, and write about basically anything without any major difficulties. So on the right-hand side, you'll see how many hours it tends to take for each levels. If you're wondering where these numbers came from, I've used 2 different data sources, and then I've combined that with just my personal experience of myself learning languages, as well as having worked with, well, personally taught, I want to say upwards of, God, probably less than 1,000, but more than 700 students. And then and that's like me personally teaching them, and then having taught in a short-term capacity or through my tutors, thousands upon thousands of students. So it's based on that, and it's based on two different research studies. One of them is published by the Cambridge University. I'll give the links to these at the end, in case you want to read them. The Cambridge study explores what factors influence how long it takes someone to learn a language. It explores some factors of what are some factors that would influence it. So one factor, for instance, is if you did, let's say, 100 to 150 hours of study. Well, let's actually go higher up. Let's say you did 1,000 hours of study, but you did that in 4 years compared to 2 years, you would probably learn more in 2 years than you would in 4 years, even though it's the same amount of study. Why? Because generally speaking, the more you condense your studies, the faster you learn. That's one of the findings of that study. Now, there are exceptions because you can't. There's also the concept of mental fatigue. So if your brain is tired after an hour of study in a day, doing an extra 3 beyond that hour doesn't make any sense because it's not productive. It's not a productive use of time. So it works to an extent. Condensing your studies will accelerate your progress to an extent. But that's one example that's covered in that study. It also gives these really cool case studies where it'll say, okay, if you try to learn whatever language and you're an adult and you have adequate access to resources and you're like very motivated, how long would it take? How long would it take if you did it in 35 weeks? How long would it take if you condensed it further? How long would it take in this situation, this scenario? Case study 2. What if you're a teenager and you have an excellent teacher, but you're not very motivated? What would it look like then? And they kind of break down numbers. It goes into really interesting case studies like that. The other data source I've used is arguably one of the cleanest data sources anyone's published and easiest to read in terms of how long it takes to learn a language. It's the FSI data. Some of you may have looked at it. The Foreign Service Institute, you may have already looked at that. I find some language learners have. Foreign Service Institute works with US diplomats and government officials, and they teach them a whole bunch of different languages. And they've just published their data over, I think it's 60 or 70 years of data they have of how long it takes their adult learners to reach about a B2/C1, kind of an upper B2, something like that. And they'll say, okay, and they even do it by language. They'll say, okay, Spanish and French and these languages take about 1,000 hours, Japanese and Mandarin, blah, blah, take about 2,200 hours or whatever the case is. Okay. Let's go here. I would highly recommend you use some kind of habit tracker to keep yourself motivated and track your hours. I would highly recommend that. It's not necessarily for everyone because everyone learns differently. There's no doubt about that. But I think there's a good percentage of people that can benefit from using one. So this one on the left is one that I personally use it. I can even show you at the end what mine looks like. I'm using it for Mandarin at the moment. So it's broken up by months. Then there's there's months, then there's different categories: speaking, listening, reading, writing, grammar, and other. There's little boxes under each category. Each box represents 30 minutes of practice. So you color in a box after you've done 30 minutes of practice. So 30 minutes of speaking, color in a box. 30 minutes of listening, color in a box. I've left an empty space here in case you want to go and add extra boxes for certain sections. So there's lots of different types of habit trackers you can use. This is just one that I made. So there's how long it takes. We know that, okay, it's roughly this many hours for this level, this many hours for this level, this many hours for this level. Great. Well, then how do you spend that time? Let's talk about it. So I'm just going to pause for 30 seconds here. I'll let you just read this on your own, and then we'll go through this together. So I'll just sit in silence. I'll let you read this. Okay. So let's go through this together here. So over here we have listening. And by the way, this is active listening. We're going to talk about this momentarily. This is not passive listening, but it's active listening. We'll talk about what that means in a second. So it's about 4 hours or more in a month, reading about 4 hours or more in a month, writing 2.5 or more hours a month, speaking 2.5 hours or more per month, grammar at least an hour a month, other up to 4 hours a month. So if you're using any apps or vocab study or whatever the case is, if you do this, you'll have dedicated a total of 21 hours so by the time you're done, you'll have a 14 to 18 hours of study done in a month. You want to dedicate ideally in an ideal world, another 3 to 7 hours each month to reach a total of about 21 hours of study or practice time. It's a very specific number. I'll walk you through where it comes from. If you're doing 21 hours a month, you're going to average about 250 hours of study a year. That ends up being about an hour a day. If you're trying to think, well, that's monthly. What is that per week? Well, it's about 5 hours a week, roughly speaking. 4 to 5, because 5 hours a week will get you 260 hours in a year, but it's a small amount more. It's not really important. The reason it's a very specific number. I probably spent 2 hours thinking about what that number should be. Here's the reason. If you're below a B2, by doing 250 hours a month, aka about 5 hours a week, no matter what level you have below a B2, you have the potential to move forward up to 2 levels within a year. Most people don't do that within a year. In my experience, most language learners spin their wheels. They don't move forward. And that's huge, because let's break down a scenario. If you're a complete beginner, you have the potential within 2 years to reach a B1, which means that you can talk about, you're conversational. You can talk about basically anything as long as you don't have to get very detailed about it. That's huge. That's huge. Like most people aren't able to do that in 2 years. That's not common. Some people do it, right? If you do so, and 5 hours a week is something where it makes language learning a commitment, but it's not completely, it's not an unreasonable amount of time. 5 hours a week is not, God, it's an hour a day on weekdays, which is a lot, I understand, but it's very doable if you make language learning a priority, right? If you make it a priority, it's quite doable. If you take it seriously, it's doable. So that's why I picked that, because it allows you to make significant progress, and you'll notice progress every couple of months. I find language learners don't feel their progress very frequently. They feel it in spurts, like 6 months later, a year later, like something will happen that shows you how much you've progressed. And and you'll think to yourself, wow, I couldn't do that before. Wow, I really progressed. But you don't feel like you've progressed every couple of months. You don't feel it. But you very likely will if you're doing 5 hours a week. You very, very likely will. Now at the B2 level, if you already have that, you've got a larger gap to get into the C's, so you won't be able to progress by a level every year, every 2 years. So that is what it is. But most people are not at a B2 trying to get to the C's, I find. Most people do not have an upper intermediate level and are trying to get to advanced. It's not the majority of language learners. So that's why I picked that number. It's a very specific number. Could you do less? Sure. Could you do more? Sure. But this is a guideline to follow. I should also mention that you don't necessarily have to follow these exact numbers of 2.5 hours of writing, 2.5 hours. You don't have to follow those exact numbers per se. It's okay to modify this, but this is a good guideline to be aware of. This is a reasonably balanced approach to a reasonably balanced way to approach it. That's probably a good way to look at it. It's a reasonably balanced way to approach it, but you're more than welcome to modify it based on any specific needs you have. So if you're learning like Mandarin and you've been learning for 3 years and you never have learned to read and write, and now you're like, man, I really want to learn to read and write, you might like really up this writing time and reduce some of the other hours and other things you're doing because you've decided to work on your character recognition and character printing, for example, right? Here's a couple sample study plans. We're not going to like talk through this, maybe take a screenshot, or I'll give you guys 30 seconds to read it and I'll go to the next slide. These are just a couple samples I made. Okay, let's move on. Let's go through my favorite resources, because now you know, you're like, okay, I know I got to do listening, I got to do reading, writing, great speaking, but we haven't talked about the resources you can use to practice those and how to go about practicing those. So I'd like to talk about that now. So part one is speaking resources. So one would be hiring a tutor through my business. If we teach a language that you are learning, and if you have the budget to, and if you have the budget to do that kind of thing. A few things that set my business apart. So I'm big on measurable results. I'm very, very big on that, meaning that you will know very specifically what you're working on and what you'll be able to accomplish after a certain period of time. So you'll always know exactly what steps to take and how much progress you can expect. And we'll follow up on that. So I'm a big believer of measurable results. It's very motivating to treat any learning that way, that anything you try to learn, any kind of new skill you try to learn, when you treat it that way, tends to be very motivating. I do take a linguistics, and very specifically a second language acquisition based approach when it comes to teaching. I also, as I mentioned earlier, take a very psychological behavioral approach as well. It has to do with my previous work experience, actually, which is not relevant for today, but it was a big part of my previous work, which is why it comes into my current work. Most of my tutors are language learners, so they also are learning languages themselves. So they know what it's like to be a language learner. And we're a very values-based team. So everyone's very friendly, very honest, punctual. I hire more based on personality than teaching experience, slightly. I slightly value personality and soft skills more than I do teaching experience. So, and you can also use Italki. Many of you've probably heard of it. If not, it's a website. It's like a tutor. It's what do you call it? Like an online tutor bank, something like that. So tutors can go set their own rates, advertise themselves on the platform, and you can hire them. There's some really big pros to it. So they're great for conversational lessons. I've used the platform a lot for quite a few languages, and they're really good for conversational lessons. There's a wide variety of languages offered, and you can likely find someone with the price to match. No matter whatever your budget is, you can probably find someone that fits within your budget, which is great. It's a really good platform. I'm a big fan of it. And we're not going to talk a lot about HelloTalk, but we'll talk briefly. It's not really a tutoring platform, but if you're looking for someone to practice speaking with, you can find language exchange partners. So you can help someone practice the language that you speak. They'll help you practice the language that they speak. Depending on how old you are, you'll want to make sure that I believe HelloTalk, unless you're in, I believe it's if you're in Europe, they have a different age limit, like as a youngest age. I think most countries is 12. So it's pretty young. I think it should be more than 12 in my opinion, but that's what their platform says. But check for your country. I will actually need to, one day I'm going to make a whole presentation about how to use HelloTalk, because it's not, unfortunately, it's not something you can just download and start using. I mean, you could, but the problem, I see there's a lot of problems people face with the app, and I want to actually make a whole presentation to address each of those problems and how to work through it. So it's really hit and miss. Some people love it, some people don't. And so it's worth a try to see if you're one of those people, if you love it or hate it. Would you mind sending these slides in the Slack? I didn't know there was a Slack. What I can do is I'll try to, but to be safe, take notes or take screenshots to be safe. So yeah, we won't talk much about HelloTalk, but it is an option. There's another option which is called, what's it called? Tandem. Same concept, different company. And the last one, it sounds so silly, but Google, you'd be shocked what you find on Google if you just switch up your search queries and look through more than just page one of the results and look through multiple pages of results and like read the Google results. You'll find you'd be shocked what you'll find on Google. You'll find lots of tutors or language exchange partners or practice partners or things like that. You'll find lots. You can also talk to yourself. There's a great video about this guy. He gives instructions for doing self-talk. I'd have to find the video link, but that one also goes hit and miss. Some people I find are great at talking to themselves and some people are not. They find some people feel too awkward about it. If you talk to yourself though, please realize that it's not a perfect substitute to talking to a native speaker, but it's something you can do and you can get practice that way. It's not a bad way to spend your time. Now, if you are going to go the tutor route, if you're going to go the tutor route, I want to give some, what time is it? Let me see. Do we have time to go through this? Yeah, we do. I want to give you some tips to find the right tutor because it's not just about hiring a tutor if that's the route you decided to go. So you'll want to ask for an initial consultation. It's often free. On certain platforms, you have to pay a little bit. Like Italki, you have to pay for a trial lesson, but it's just typically cheaper than like their usual lesson rate. But often many tutors will do a free consultation. I would recommend you take trial lessons with 3 or more tutors before choosing one. That way you can see how different people teach, see different styles, and make sure you can pick someone that really matches with you. And you want to take the time to find a tutor you get along with well, like you actually want to get along with on a personal level. And unless it's just unless you are just using a tutor for conversation practice and it's not one of the main strategies you're relying on, unless that's the case, you'll want to agree upon learning objectives and the roadmap to reaching them. What that means is if the tutor is like one of the main strategies you're relying on, you want to make sure you know what are we working on and roughly speaking, how are we going to reach there? Are we going to use are you going to talk to me? Are we going to do like a lot of listening? Do you have like a textbook? Or you like how are we going about this? You want to review your progress every 2 to 3 months. That way you can make sure that you're actually moving forward and you can vet your own processes. Like, am I actually approaching this in the right way? And you can also check in to see if your tutor's good because you might like your tutor, but you might realize that it's not working with that tutor. Now, be careful not to only externalize and blame a tutor because you always have responsibility for your learning. There's always responsibility on both sides, but that is still, without doing this review, you can't figure out what the problems are in terms of why you're not moving forward. And lastly, do your research. Don't rush to hire a tutor. Like take some time. A good tutor makes a huge difference, huge difference. I'll walk you through like a little action plan you can use to find a good tutor if you want it broken down in steps. Step 1, make a list of 10 potential tutors. Write down their availability and the rate that they each charge. So you might say, okay, Ana Alvarez. I see Ana Alvarez here. Ana Alvarez charges $12 an hour. Oh, she's available in the evenings. Okay, great. Whoever. Janine, $29 an hour. Available only Monday mornings. Oh, I like Monday mornings, so maybe that's worth it. I'll write that down. So make a list of 10 potential ones. You narrow it down to 3 to 5 tutors that you're like, okay, these are the ones I think I'm the most interested in. You book a consultation and or trial lesson with them. In your trial lesson or consultation, you quote unquote interview your tutors. So you want to make sure you ask about their teaching experience and how they teach. You want to make sure you agree upon your learning objectives and have a clear roadmap to achieving them. You want to make sure you tell your tutor that you want to review your progress every 2 to 3 months because most tutors don't do that. It's not a typical practice. Although it's a very important practice. And then you'll select and hire 1 or more tutor because you might like more than one person. You might go, yeah, I want to hire more than one person. I've written here book 2 or more lessons a week. That would be in the circumstance that you decided that you're going to use a tutor as the primary learning engine. If you decide that's a primary thing you're going to do to learn, you'll want to have 2 or more lessons a week. However, if it's one thing you're doing among lots of other things, then, you know, 1 a week or 3 a month or 2 a month, like that's okay then too. But so it doesn't have to be 2 a week. It just depends on how you're approaching the process. But if you're like relying on tutoring heavily and a private lessons or even semi-private lessons heavily to progress, you'll want 2 or more a week, 2 to 2 or more, let's just say. And then the +1, it doesn't happen in the hiring process, the process of hiring the tutor, but it's something that'll happen 2 to 3 months later. Don't forget to review your progress every 2 to 3 months. I have put together a bit of a guide for those that are interested that has an initial consultation form, a language goal checklist. You can kind of track what you're going to work on with your tutor, as well as a 2 to 3 month review form. It looks like this. So here's the consultation form. I'll give you guys just like 10 seconds to look at it and scan your way through it. Here's a language goal checklist you can use to track what you're going to work towards. And here's, let's go to the next one here. And here's a 2 to 3 month review form. This one's a little bit of a more lengthy form, but it's kind of small. I can read this too. It's a list of questions that as I said, I take a very behavioral and psychological approach to learning. So what you're doing here is these questions are going to guide you through reflecting upon your previous progress and help you figure out what to change. So what topics are you planning to cover during the first 2 to 3 months? You then list them out. What topics did you actually cover over the first 2 to 3 months? You write them out. How did you originally plan on working on those topics? What kind of homework did you originally plan on doing? You write that out. How did you actually work on those topics? And what kind of homework did you actually do? Right? So you're comparing to see like what happened here. I can't read because the sample's hiding. What is this? Were you able to converse about the above mentioned topics? What role did you play in reaching or not reaching your goal? And what role did your tutor play? What would you do differently if you can go back in time? So now it's helping you learn from your experience. Speak with your tutor and list out the topics that you'll work on and aim to converse about confidently after 2 to 3 months more of lessons. I can't read this sentence because the sample's covering it, but so anyway, that's what this is. So that's on the speaking side. Let's go to listening. Now, listening resources, there's so many, and there's different ones for different languages, but I'll give you one that seems to work for a wide variety of languages, which is Link. Oops, sorry. Link, let me actually show you what it is. Easier shown than explained. I'll just share my screen on Link and show you guys. Oops. They've also changed their interface. So if you're someone that used to use it and didn't like it, which I was one of those people, like I used it close to when it first came out, and I hated it because it was a good platform. It was just so clunky and really difficult to use, and it was so glitchy and can't really share my screen again. Yeah, and it's kind of funny. They actually changed the there we go. They changed their interface like a month ago, and I like the new interface. This is like what the homepage looks like on a computer. It is also an app as well. It's free. There's a wide selection of languages. Let's add a new one. So there's like a wide selection of languages. They even have some beta languages too. So they're always adding new ones, which is cool. So pretty wide selection of languages. And the way it works is, let's just click on, let's see here. Let's go up here to start. There's a sliding bar so you can indicate what your level is and what level of content you're looking for. Let's say you're a beginner. You're going to get a whole bunch of different audios with transcripts. Let's say you want to do this one. Okay. There's an audio. So if I click on this play button, hope you guys can hear that. Forward a bit.
Forcément, tout le monde se pose plein de questions sur cette nouvelle maladie. Comme Pauline, 10 ans.
Okay. It gives you a transcript. If you have the paid version of the app, which is about, I think it's like $10 US a month or something like that, 10 or 12, something like that. You can click on these words and it'll tell you what it means. Like you'll get a dictionary definition or translation rather. You can save them. So if I click on this, it'll save it into the app. So I have that saved as like a new word and it turns to yellow. So as you can see, I turn this petit yellow and now this petit has also become yellow. So all petit in the app is now yellow. By default, all words are blue. So if you don't have the paid version of the app, which is fine, it's still an excellent app. You'll want to have a dictionary or translator open on the side in a different tab. I highly recommend deepl.com/translator. I'll put the link in the chat. That's the link. By far the most accurate translator I've come across. And not even like slightly better, like way better. Let's do like a live demo. Let's do a Spanish one. Especially when it comes to figuring out the context of your sentence, DeepL does a much better job. Like if I take something like, what's something that Google would mess up? Okay, I got one. Let's take an expression like, what's your beef? Okay. What's your beef is like, what's your problem in case English isn't your first language, right? So Spanish is that ¿cuál es tu problema? Which means what's your problem? I bet you anything. We go to Google Translate. So let's go English to Spanish. And I go, what's your beef? We get ¿cuál es tu carne? Which literally means which is your beef? Like which one of these is your meat? Is your meat, not beef, sorry, meat. So this is wrong. This is not what I'm looking for. So Google doesn't quite do as good of a job, for example, as DeepL. Now Google is an app. DeepL doesn't have an app, so there's that. You know, there are some advantages to Google, like if you're traveling or something. But as a learning tool, DeepL is way better. And DeepL too. Let's say you're like, okay, I see this sentence. What does the word "cuál" mean? If I double click on "cuál" and I scroll down, it's going to give me a dictionary, like the meaning of that one word. And then if I keep scrolling, oh no, wait, hang on. Nope, not here. Oh, they don't have that functionality. That's okay. That's fine. If you just click on, but if you click on the word, it will at least give you the dictionary definition too, or the translation as well. So I do like DeepL a lot. So if you don't have the paid version, you're going to want to have DeepL open on a different tab because you'll need to look things up. Okay. Now, while we're going through listening, there's a process for active listening, and it's not just about, oh, I'm going to listen. It's not exactly how it works. I'll walk you through it. Let's take the French one for now. So I've made these guides for about 7 or 8 different languages, and the specific guides to help people learn that language. So let me take you through one piece of it here. I want to go to the listening section. Okay, so you'll want to write this down and take a screenshot for sure. So step 1, you pick an audio or video that's at your level. It shouldn't feel too easy to understand, nor should it feel overwhelmingly difficult. So the gauge that I use for me personally is if there are so many new words that I feel like I'm not if I'm looking up all these new words and I'm not understanding what I'm listening to, like even after looking things up, I'm not understanding. I'm like, wait, what? Even after I look things up, then it's probably too hard. So I was trying to do a song in Mandarin about 2 weeks ago. And there's so many new words and the words were quite abstract. And I was like, I don't really understand this. Like, even when I look things up, I'm still like not fully getting it. And I was getting kind of frustrated. So I was like, no, too hard. It should feel challenging, but not so challenging that you get frustrated. You listen to the whole audio without pausing and without reading the subtitles or transcript. By the way, transcript needs to be in the same language. So like Spanish language, Spanish subtitles, English language, English subtitles, Mandarin language, Mandarin subtitles, not Mandarin language, English subtitles, Spanish language, English subtitles. That's not what you're doing. So you listen to the whole thing without pausing and without reading the subtitles or transcript. You listen again with the subtitles or transcript, and you're pausing as needed to look up words or phrases you don't know. So until you're able to understand the sentences. So you might be pausing every 2 to 3 sentences. That might happen. And it might take you 2 hours to get through 7 minutes of audio or video. But that's okay. It's still worth your time. Right? The purpose is to take it nice and slow and learn new words, train your ears to understand, right? You listen again with the subtitles or transcript, but you don't pause. Okay, so you've gone through the whole thing. Now you go back and you listen to the whole thing again with the subtitles or transcript, but you don't pause this time. Right now you're just listening again and you're like looking and you're reading as you listen to see, do I get it now? Do I need to pause? Am I able to do this? Then you go back again and you listen without the subtitles or transcript to see if you can really understand. If at step 5 you're still struggling, go back a step, right? If at any of these steps you struggle again, you're like, ooh, I listened again with the subtitles or transcript, the sections I didn't get. Well, go back to step 3, find those sections, look at the words again, go, oh, right, that's what's being said. Re-listen to that segment. Step 6, if you selected a resource that provides exercises or worksheets, Link doesn't, the one I showed you a second ago doesn't, but for specific languages, there are specific websites, right? And it would take us forever to go through each and every language. But if there are worksheets or exercises, this is when you complete them. I find most people listen once or twice, then they try to complete the exercise. But no, that's not what you want to do. You want to actually go through the audio and really understand it, then go answer the questions. Otherwise, on practice exercise and worksheets, it's too easy just to go and sometimes guess your way through the questions because you understood enough to go answer some of the questions, but you didn't really understand the full audio. And it's too easy to do that if you didn't actually really listen carefully and fully understand it. Step 7, you listen to the whole audio again without subtitles or transcript every 48 to 72 hours for the next 2 weeks. So think of this, if you guys know what spaced repetition is, it's kind of like a spaced repetition. It's kind of like a spaced repetition, but instead of spaced repetition, it's interval repetition. I don't know if that's a real term. I made it up or who knows, but you're giving yourself that repetition to help your brain still remember those words. By the time you've done this process, boy, whatever video you picked or audio you picked, you'll know all those, most of the new words, if not all of them, will be deeply ingrained in your brain. Your vocabulary will have increased a lot. Your listening ability will have increased a lot. Your ability to speak will also have been marginally improved, especially if you do some speaking practice, because a lot of the words and such you've learned them and you've heard them so much, you've seen them in context or heard them in context so much that it becomes easier to use them. Now, if you don't do any output, meaning no speaking or writing, and you never do any practice, listening may not, magically feed your speaking. But if you're doing some, your listening will feed your speaking. Okay. Let's go back to the presentation. So that's the link for you. So we did this. We just went through this how-to already. So those steps are from one of my learning. Like I have these learning guides I've made for various languages that they're these 17+ page documents. Take some time to go through them, but it will give you all the resources you need, all this, like most of the resources you would need to improve in each respect: listening, reading, writing, and listening, speaking, reading, and writing. I mean, lots of activities for that. Lots of resources for that. So that's something you may want to look into. Last part 3 here is writing prompts. So you're going to need, let me switch screens here as well. I'm switch to a different screen. Let's switch over to this guy here. So writing will feed your speaking. And I'll show you what to write about. Oh, did I not click on enter? Oh, I did. Okay, good. Writing. So low beginners, you're going to write short sentences using words, phrases, and grammar that you know, because you can't write anything long. You might just write things like, hi, how are you? Hello, my name is Azrin. What's your name? My name's Bob. Nice to meet you, Bob. Like you might write little dialogues. You might even just write words, you know, because you might not even be able to put together proper sentences. You might not have the knowledge, right? But that's a way to apply your knowledge and try and take the knowledge that's in your brain and kind of put it together to be able to communicate in a way that's far more controllable than doing conversation practice. Mid to high beginners, you're going to write short paragraphs on various topics using words, phrases, and grammar that you know. Intermediate and advanced, you're going to write short journal entries and essay style responses on various topics that interest you. No matter what your level is, you must get people to correct your feedback to avoid cemented errors. And the correction and feedback is just as important as the actual writing portion. So you can ask a private tutor, like a private tutor if you have one. You can ask a language exchange partner on apps such as HelloTalk, which we talked about earlier. Alternatively, you could use the Italki community section. So let's go here. I'll show you that. So here, if I click on ask, I can ask whatever. I can say, hi, everyone. I wrote this text and was hoping someone could correct it for me. And then you can paste it and someone will jump in and correct it. Very, very likely anyway. Very likely someone will. Oops, I want to go to, oh no, sorry, I want to go back. Okay. Don't use online translators when you write. It's too much of a crutch. And I want you to use your brain to think. I don't want the translator to do the thinking for you. As a compromise, what you can do is if you're struggling to say if you don't know how to write something, think about it for 10 minutes before you use an online translator. Like use your brain first. Brain goes first, then translator, and that's like a compromise. But you want to limit your reliance on translators when you're doing this kind of practice. This will speed your speaking ability. Like I'm communicating pretty clearly today. If I did this presentation 6 months ago, I would not be communicating this clearly. Why? The reason I did is actually, funnily enough, it's because I took 80 hours to write these learning guides and actually write them out in a clear and concise way, do the research for them, write them out. So because I wrote about it first, I wrote about them. I also wrote this page on my website as well, which kind of goes through a lot of what we're talking about today. So because I spent 80 hours writing about it, now I can talk about it in English very, very concisely and like in a sharp way. But 6 months ago, I couldn't have done that because I didn't write about it first. So even in your mother tongue, writing feeds your speaking. Oh, if you need writing prompts, by the way, if you're like, what should I write about? You have a couple options. In my guides, I have a whole bunch of writing prompts, but I'll give you another option too. I always like to give people a free option. I don't want to always give paid options. I like to give free options too. But if you buy a guide, you'll have all the writing prompts you'll need organized by level. But if you're not going to, an alternative, which is free, would be to go to Google and search ESL writing prompts. That's one option. You can find lots of hundreds of websites that will give you writing prompts that have lots of different prompts or different levels. You can even go A1 writing prompts and search by level, and you will find some things at that level. You can go A2 writing prompts, B1 writing prompts, right? You can kind of go through that and you'll find some. That's a kind of a free alternative. I think we're getting close to the end here, then we'll take some questions. Yeah. So any closing remarks? So we've gone through a lot today, and I know it's a lot. We've gone through pretty quickly, but to kind of wrap this up, if you do want extra help to sort of bring this all together, you're more than welcome to book a free session with me on Zoom. I'll put links in the chat for everything in a second. You're more than welcome to book a free consultation with me on Zoom. You will probably have to book a few weeks out because my calendar is like it's just so full. It gets so full. It gets very full very quickly. But you're more than welcome to book a time with me. Just make sure you write down when you book it because it will likely be a few weeks out. Whoops. I'll put, if you want to get the guide to finding a great tutor, any of my learning guides or the habit trackers I mentioned earlier, I'll put the links for that. Those can also maybe help you consolidate everything we talked about. But even just if we book a free consultation, that'll help a lot too. Like all these will help, to be honest. But these are the two studies I mentioned earlier, the Cambridge University study, what factors that affect how long it takes to learn a language, and the Foreign Service Institute data. I'll put these links in the chat for you as well in case you want to just kind of click them because you can't click on my screen, obviously. Okay, so let me put those links, then we'll do some Q&A. So FSI, oops. So FSI,